Imagine this for a moment. Two people have been fighting for years. You become a close friend of one of them. You believe that friendship gives you security, influence, and an advantage. But then one day, those same two people decide to stop fighting. Suddenly, you realize something. The very rivalry that made you important is beginning to disappear. Now, here is the question. If tensions between America and China start easing, which country might feel the most uncomfortable? Surprisingly, it could be India. And that's exactly why the recent signals coming from Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are attracting so much attention around the world. Because this story isn't just about America and China, it's also about India's future place in the global order. And what we are about to discuss is far more important than the headlines suggest. Over the last few years, we've all heard one phrase repeatedly: US China rivalry, trade wars, technology wars, semiconductor restrictions, Taiwan tensions, military competition, economic competition. The world's two most powerful economies competing for influence, each trying to secure its position in the future international order. But recently, the diplomatic warmth between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping has prompted many strategic observers to ask an important question. Are the two countries trying to manage their differences differently? Could some form of accommodation emerge despite their rivalry? And perhaps, most importantly, what happens if America gradually accepts China as a legitimate major power with a larger role in Asia? To understand why this matters, we need to go back in time, way back almost 2500 years. During discussions with Donald Trump, Xi Jinping raised an interesting question. Can America and China avoid the Thucydides trap? If you've never heard that term before, don't worry. The idea is actually quite simple. An ancient Greek historian named Thucydides observed something important. When a rising power grows rapidly and begins challenging an established power, the risk of conflict increases dramatically. In ancient Greece, Athens was rising and Sparta was already dominant. The result? War. Today, many scholars use that historian lesson to explain tensions between America and China. America represents the established superpower. China represents the rising challenger, and the competition between them creates natural pressure towards confrontation. But here's the part many people misunderstand. The Thucydides trap does not mean war is inevitable. It simply means that rivalry becomes dangerous if both sides fail to manage it wisely. And perhaps that's why Xi's question was so significant. Because he was essentially asking, can competition exist without conflict? Think about that. Now the story becomes even more interesting. Many Indians believe that America and India are naturally close strategic partners. But the reality is slightly more complicated. A major reason America became interested in strengthening ties with India was China. As China's influence expanded, Washington needed partners in Asia. And India seemed like a natural choice. A large democracy, a growing economy, a rising regional power, a country capable of balancing China's growing influence. Then came the civil nuclear agreement, then the Asia pivot, then the Indo-Pacific strategy, and then the Quad. Step by step, India became increasingly important to America's vision for Asia. And India benefited significantly from that process. Its international relevance increased, its diplomatic influence expanded, its strategic importance grew. In simple terms, the sharper the rivalry between America and China became, the more valuable India appeared. But there was also a hidden risk. Many people assume that India can benefit from great power competition the same way China once did. But the comparison is not entirely accurate. In the 1970s, China occupied a very different position. It had enormous strategic leverage. Both Washington and Moscow needed Beijing. and that gave China tremendous bargaining power. India's situation today is quite different. India is undoubtedly important, but the gap between India and China remains significant in several critical areas: manufacturing, technology, exports, military modernization, infrastructure. In many of these sectors, China operates on completely different scale. And then there is another challenge: the China Pakistan partnership, a relationship that complicates India's security calculations considerably, which means India is not simply dealing with China, it is dealing with a broader strategic equation involving both China and Pakistan. And because of that reality, American support becomes increasingly valuable to India, even if that fact is not always openly acknowledged. Now consider this possibility. What if America eventually decides that containing China indefinitely is impossible? What if both countries gradually develop a political understanding? That doesn't mean they become allies. It doesn't mean they suddenly trust each other. But if their rivalry becomes less intense, India's strategic importance could also decline. Why? Because America may no longer need India as urgently as a balancing power. This is exactly the concern many strategic experts are highlighting. A significant part of India's geopolitical value today comes from the competition between Washington and Beijing. And if that competition softens, the equation changes. And that possibility naturally creates anxiety in New Delhi. The situation becomes even more complicated because Donald Trump approaches foreign policy differently from many previous American presidents. During the administrations of George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, India US relations generally moved in one direction: deeper cooperation, closer strategic ties, more convergence. Trump's style is different, more transactional, more unpredictable. Sometimes tariffs, sometimes visa disputes, sometimes trade pressures, and sometimes unexpected statements. The relationship continues, but predictability decreases. And in geopolitics, predictability matters. Countries build strategies around certainty, not surprises, and which is why New Delhi must pay close attention not only to Beijing but also to Washington. There is a deeper lesson hidden inside this story. Countries do not have permanent friends, they have permanent interest. And we've all heard that phrase. But international politics keeps proving it true. Today's rival can become tomorrow's negotiating partner, and today's partner can become tomorrow's source of pressure. And that's why successful nations avoid becoming only dependent on any single power. They build options, they build capabilities, they strengthen their economies, they develop technological independence. Because ultimately, respect does not come from alliance alone, it comes from strength. Think about that. So, what is the biggest lesson for India? Should India panic? Absolutely not. Should India be cautious? Definitely. India cannot assume that America will always oppose China. Nor can it assume that today's geopolitical environment will remain unchanged forever. The world is evolving, power balances are shifting, alliances are adapting, and in this changing environment, India must continue strengthening its own strategic autonomy, economic power, manufacturing capabilities, technological leadership, military preparedness, regional influence. All of these become even more important because when great powers negotiate, the strongest voice usually belongs to the country that possesses strength of its own. Today's story was not really about Trump, and it was not really about Xi Jinping. Today's story was about India's future, a future in which the world's two most powerful countries may redefine their relationship. And whenever giants reposition themselves, every country around them must rethink its own strategy. The question is not whether America and China will become friends. The real question is this: if the world's biggest geopolitical rivalry changes, will India be ready for the new world that emerges? Because perhaps the biggest geopolitical risks are not the ones making headlines today. They are the ones quietly taking shape in the background. And by the time the world notices them, the game has already changed. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found this story valuable and meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and insightful stories. Thank you so much.